One. Hello and welcome to Rising Up with Jeryl Anne. I'm your host, Jeryl Anne, and it is a glorious, beautiful Sunday here in in Florida, and I'm bringing my guest, Jay Rothman, from sunny California today. So before we get into our interview with Jay, if you would please share out to your friends, to your groups, this show, I'm going to do the same. And let's all share this out if we can. And then we have got a magnificent show for you today. This is just going to be absolutely amazing. I'm so excited to have Jay with me here. I have to tell you, I got to know Jay. He is with Spirituality Gone Wild, as many of you know of. And I had seen this guy, and he was doing these really cool blogs and these very real and visceral types of like quick little live blurbs on Facebook. And I'm going, wow, this guy is like seriously cool and seriously vulnerable. And so he actually contacted me. And so let's welcome my guest, Jay Rothman. And Jay is a very successful health and wellness coach. He's a grief coach, a relationship coach, and a life coach. Welcome, Jay. I'm so happy to have you.
Thank you for having me this afternoon. I'm normally Sunday is usually my day off, but when you invited me to come on, and of course I was honored, and I wouldn't say no to this opportunity. So I thank you for hearing my story that I shared with you, and believing that perhaps there may be some people out there on social media that would hear something that I share that may actually help them in their own healing journey, whether it be emotional, mental, physical, or spiritual. Because what I've learned is if any one of those four are off within myself, then I'm empty. And yes. So they all work in tandem. We just can't focus on one without focusing on the other three. So again, thank you for inviting me on.
Jay, I am so grateful to you for, kind of giving your day off up for the show, because I truly do believe that what you have to say, as I'm sitting here, if you could see me, folks, I have God bumps from head to toe and my hair is standing on end, because I know this man's story. It actually moves me to tears when I think about it, and because I know what you're gonna tell everyone. And his story is remarkable. It is transformative, and I know there is so much that you all are going to take away from this. So I don't want to talk anymore. This is a man who came back basically from death and completely transformed his life. But I'm going to turn it over to you, Jay, and I'm going to let you tell our viewers exactly how you got from point A to point Z and everything in between, if you don't mind.
Sure. Before I go here, I would like to invite viewers to share their comments. If they have any questions, I'll allow Jeryl Anne to post ones that she feels, if any, are appropriate to put up on a screen so we can address them. I'm going to go as quickly as I can in sharing what comes from my heart and soul, not from my head, because my best thinking nearly took me out. I had a lot of thoughts, and I had a lot of ideas, and I had a lot of solutions, and they were for everybody else. And that falls on not that I'm a believer today in labels, but I was a classic codependent personality type. And I had honed those skills so well that by the time I woke up, I was in big trouble. And not only was I in trouble, but the people around me that I cared the most about, I had caused such damage, I believe damage to them as well, unintentionally. But, you know, my story isn't about them. My story is about my healing and my recovery. And really what it's about is I had my life had become so complicated. I was married to a woman for 29 years. We separated at the 29th year, and we had have three sons. I'm originally from New York, born and raised in New York, city area, Queens, Flushing, and then moved out to Long Island from second grade on. And that's my background. That's where I'm from originally. Through many geographical moves over my adulthood, I relocated to eight different states, thinking that was a good idea. Because what I didn't know at the time was what I know today, is that those geographical moves were me running away from my darkness of my soul, and thinking that if I just started over, life would show up and life would get better. And unfortunately, I didn't realize, even in all those moves, how much it had impacted my family. For me, it was relatively easy because I was always busy with my career. My wife was a stay-at-home mom, and so each time that she would start to kind of get rooted in community around the 3-year, 4-year mark, I would get that itch. And then I'd come up with another great business opportunity, a bump in income, a new territory, a new competitor, let's call it, and sold the family on let's make the move. And that just kept repeating year after year, decade after decade. And before we knew it, life had caught up. And I didn't know that that I was, let's say, I had a lot of internal traumas and wounds. I was so busy focused on everyone else's, what I saw as, let's say, weaknesses and problems, that I kept the focus on them. And that was a great distraction, because although I knew in 1995 that I had some issues, I went into therapy and counseling. I was diagnosed with, at the time, generalized anxiety disorder. The answer then was pharmaceuticals, two antidepressants, and that stayed with me for 21 years. Lots of different therapists. I didn't get any relief in therapy, but the only thing I got was pills that actually, I think, contributed to me numbing out my emotions and feelings. So by the time I was 48, I was on a business trip. I was on the back end of a trip, and I suffered a heart attack. And at that time, I was in a leadership position in a multi-million-dollar organization based in Long Beach, California. And I was under a tremendous amount of pressure. A lot of it was self-induced, again, because of my thinking. Whether or not it was the reality, I put a lot of self-imposed pressure on myself to perform at a very high level. And what I know, what was behind that even was, again, my own insecurities, my own feelings of I'm less than, I'm not worthy, I'm not smart enough. And if they find out the truth, I'll be out of a job. And so that was my driver. That's what was my motivator for high stress, high performance, high commitment. You know, on an average day, I'd work 12 hours, and if I was traveling, it would be 15. And if I was having a really good day, I'd push it to 18 hours. And I did that level of what I'll call workaholism for 34 years. Before management, I was on the sales side, and but that was still my DNA. That was still my recipe. That was still my orders that I had put on myself. And so I missed a lot of what I'll say personal life opportunities. And by the time I had my heart attack, my life had gotten really complicated, primarily at home. And it was because I didn't know how profoundly impacted I was, because I had carried so many years of layers of unresolved internal traumas and pain that I just continued to I say, mask and hide in my own home. And I think every once in a while it would kind of ooze out or seep out through behavior on my part. I don't believe I was a rager, but I tell you what, if I missed my antidepressants for a day or two, and I wasn't on them for depression, I was on them for anxiety, but my kids would definitely be a trigger for me. And if I would be triggered by their behavior, there were times where I did lose control of my kids, just from a screaming perspective. So I'd say there was some potential for some verbal abuse going on my end towards my children. But it wasn't like a daily thing, and it wasn't. I don't think that was my mantra. That was my go-to. But it did happen. So now I come out, I make it through my heart attack. I come out of the hospital, and for about 4 years or 3 years, I was really like that great patient. And I was probably one of the youngest patients in the practice, my cardiologist. And I remember him saying, if there was a plaque that could be given for the perfect patient, and that, the word perfect was like, okay, bring it on. I mean, that was always what my intention was to be the perfect human being that I could be, which put a lot of pressure on me as well. And at some point, all that got thrown away. I lost my emotional sobriety because my wife and I went through another very difficult period in our home, in our marriage, in our relationship. And I just threw it all away. I just went back to all my old unhealthy behaviors. I picked up the cigarettes again. I started smoking to ease my discomfort and pain. I went back. I had lost 40 pounds, and I gained it all back. I went back to self-soothing through comfort foods. And of course, my ability to take care of myself, even when I was taking care of myself for the first 4 years, it really was, I was physically taking care of myself by exercising like a crazy man at the gym.
Yeah.
And I was eating healthier, but I didn't understand that I needed to put focus on the other aspects of myself, of my being, which was the emotional, the mental, and spiritual. Now, up until this point, I didn't have God in my life. I was brought up in a home where faith was, I was brought up in a religion, and once I was bar mitzvahed at age 13, I ran for the hills. I wanted nothing to do with Jewish faith. I had my own personal conflicts with organized Jewish faith, organized religion, and certainly was not going to explore other religions because that would have been a sin. And so I never felt connected to God, even in my religion. I went because it's what I had to do growing up in my home. And so I got bar mitzvah, but beyond that, I never felt the connection. I never felt connected to people of the Jewish faith. I always felt like an outsider. In synagogue, felt like an outsider. At school, felt like an outsider. And in home, kind of felt like an outsider. And for me, I think what really set my path for my unhealthy behavior as an adult of wanting to just take care of other people was that at some point early on in my childhood, I believe that I was the younger of the two, and I brought on, I believe, my role in birth order of my family was I was going to be that golden child. Because I watched how my sister navigated. She was 18 years my senior. And Sharon, if you're watching, thank you for joining the show live. If not, I know you'll catch it on replay. But, I watched how she navigated through the home, and I didn't like it. I just saw it seemed really difficult. It seemed like it was really painful. And I figured out early on that I needed to take a different tactical approach as a child.
Yeah.
And so for me, it was like, you know what? Instead of being the rebellious one or the rebel, the one that just pushes back and says no, I'm going to be the one that just learns how to say yes. But here's the deal, is that what I figured out early on then is that as long as I said yes in a home and the perception was that I was a good kid, then I was a good kid. But probably 50% of the time when I was saying yes, I really needed to be saying no.
So let me ask Jay, did you find then that as a child, not being your authentic self, and most of us, I grew up in a similar home that I didn't speak my truth and we weren't allowed to actually. Do you think that's what really kind of started you down that path? I know you had some different kinds of addictions, not alcohol and those things, but you are self-admitted were codependent, had different addictions that you were dealing with. So was it something that ultimately you had to kind of come to terms with, and that's what kind of led you down that path of trying to be perfect and being the golden child? And that's a lot of pressure for any of us to put on ourselves. Did you carry that into your adulthood then? Is that part of what was going on for you?
Yeah, I think what happened was by the time I was a teenager, I had figured out to play the game. And the game was in a home. I gave the answers that needed to be given. I behaved the way um, kept me out of trouble. I behaved the way that took, let's say, some of the difficulties off my mom and dad, because they were. I believe today that my parents did the best they could, but they too were wounded children. They were wounded adults that had never worked through their childhood traumas and wounds. And from what I recall of their stories, they had a boatload. They had a plethora of them, and so they did the best they could. And my job, my role was to make it as easy as possible on them, because at some age, and I think I was maybe older than 7, I already had my mom figured out, and I knew what all of her problems were, and I thought I could help my mom feel better about her own life. And so I set that path so early on um, for my behavior into adulthood. And what happened for me was when I don't know, I don't remember what age I was, 12 or 13, whenever young boys start going through puberty, I found some magazines in my dad's nightstand. Now I'm being really authentic and I'm being honest and raw. And I didn't share this part of the story with you. And I'm going to probably share some things I hadn't, but because that's how I am today. I just speak my truth. And if it bothers some people, whoever those people may be, then that's on them, because this is my truth. And so
Right.
I'm just putting that out there. So I found sex, and it felt good. And if I had found alcohol and drug before I found sex, I probably may have become an alcoholic addict of
Right.
drugs. But because that was my first go-to, the first time that I felt, I'd say, self-soothing relief was through sex, that became my go-to. And so by the time I had met my wife and married her, I know today that I already had a sex addiction that was active. And I didn't know it. I mean, I truly, in my mind, when we're in disease and we're in dis-ease that leads to the disease, our mind is so powerful. We live in delusion, we live in distorted perspectives. I didn't know that I became an artist at compartmentalizing. And I had a lot of boxes with a lot of lids. And as my story goes, by the time I hit my rock bottom, and it wasn't after my heart attack, um, I had rooms filled with nothing but shelving, the size of Costco shelving, filled with littered with compartmentalized boxes. I had a whole lifetime of compartmentalization, and that's how I lived. That's how I got through my own guilt and shame. But by the time I got, by the time I got sicker, after I threw away all my emotional and I'd say my physical sobriety of being healthy after my heart attack, when life showed up again, I got real sick. The heart attack I thought was my bottom, but it wasn't. I had to get sicker. And what that meant for me was I got discovered, unfortunately.
Okay.
By the time life unraveled, there was so much pain in my home. I got so sick physically from the internal pain that I was going through, as well as what I watched my wife go through, that I was misdiagnosed. I was told I had bursitis in my hip, but I went for PT, and after about, I think, 2 months, it wasn't working, and I just gave up, and I didn't go back to my doctor. So another maybe year passed, and fast forward, by the time that happened, I couldn't walk more than 20 feet without having to stop because the pain in my right hip and my right calf was so brutal. And I woke up one morning. Now keep in mind, I was back to over 200 pounds, 5 feet 8.5. I used to be 5'9", but you know how that works.
Yeah, I do.
But I woke up one morning. I put the 40 pounds back. I was 40-inch waist, pushing 40.5. I was smoking. I was in severe pain, physical pain. I was in emotional pain, mental pain, and as was my family members. And I went through rehab I went through a 6-month rehab program for sex addiction. I exited out of that, and I got into a 12-step program for that. And it was really difficult because it was just a lot of hurt and a lot of pain and at home.
Wow.
And so by the time a year and a half or so had passed, I woke up one morning and I had my first awakening. And I realized as I sat in the patio in my backyard that I was in trouble. I realized that something is really, really wrong. And so I called my cardiologist's office, who I hadn't seen in about a year and a half because I stopped going. Because that's what I did, and I suspect that's what maybe a lot of men do, and maybe some women. We ignore the obvious. And I called him up and I said, I think I'm in trouble. And she said, do you have chest pains? And I said, no, but I can barely walk. And she said, let me see if I can get you in to see Doc right. Can you get here right now? Instead of going to ER, because if I can't get you in, you got to go to the hospital. I'm like, no, I'm not having a heart attack. But I think something's really wrong. I slept all week and I had no energy. I could just only eat and go to the bathroom, and I had nothing. I was spent. And so she got me in that morning, and the doctor, of course, ordered all kinds of tests for my heart. And fast forward, that was the last day I smoked. Because he said, I think you are in trouble. I don't know what's going on. But the EKG initially came back, everything was fine. But he had me go for some additional tests. And when I got the call from him, he said, your heart's checked out. It's not your heart. But I need to get you to a vascular surgeon. And I didn't know what a vascular surgeon is. So, of course, I did what I always did, was I Googled it. And vascular surgeon has to do with your legs, with your blood flow to your lower extremities. And so I went and saw a vascular surgeon and found out that my right iliac artery, which was my main artery to feed my right leg, was 100% blocked. And my left was at 99. Mm-hmm. And they basically said that we can't save your right artery. We're gonna have to try for a bypass. We're gonna bypass your leg, your main artery, and go down lower to what's called the fem. The fem bypass is the femoral. And we think we could save your left leg, your left artery. But he said, it's a miracle that you're here, that you're walking, because he says, look, you have zero blood pressure going down your leg to your toes. There's no blood pressure. We can't get a pulse in your ankle. He said, do you understand that if you had fallen or gotten an infection or gotten scraped or cut or gotten any type of leg abrasion, you could have ended up having to have your leg amputated because we wouldn't have been able to save your leg. You have no blood flow going down there. And in a moment, I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Again, like form of like minimizing denial. But in any event, that's what happened. I ended up, I had surgeries, and they actually found, I put my medical team together out of Cedars-Sinai, which is one of the top in the nation for medical care. And right before surgery, I decided to go for a second opinion because my cardiologist at Long Beach had given me heart health ready to go in. But he wasn't right, because I asked for a referral out of Cedars, and they got me in to see one of the top cardiologists in the world. He's considered the cardiologist to the entertainment industry. Matter of fact, he's like Larry King's cardiologist and many other stars. And they got me in, and he got me in for additional testing, and he called me up personally while I was still in testing, and he said, "You can't have surgery in 3 days. If you have surgery, you're going to die. On the table, you'll have a massive heart attack or a stroke." And he said, because your heart is at 99% blocked, that stent that they put in after your heart attack, it's gone. It's blocked. I don't even know how you're walking, how you are breathing. So as a matter of fact, you got to go home and don't walk, don't climb stairs, just rest until we can find a doctor that can do your surgery on your heart first, because we can't go through your groin because you have no blood, you're blocked. So they had to do a different type of procedure through my wrist. And in any event, I made it through all that. And I know it took up a lot of our time.
Oh, no. I'm so grateful, Jay, because your willingness to be honest, authentic, and vulnerable is exactly what I need, my viewers need, everyone needs, because it's rare. It's so rare. And I'm truly grateful to you for being here and being you. And Bruce Weintraub, I had put the comment up before, said, "I appreciate Jay's brutal honesty to himself and his sharing." And I really do. I agree, Bruce. I completely agree, because you don't get this very often. And what you've been through is nothing short of miracle and inspirational to me. Christine Young says, "Thank you for opening up and telling us your story. God bless you, Jay." I mean, this is, you change the world, Jay. You make a difference by, you're doing this, and by you sharing your story, because you will inspire. If you only inspire one life, you've made a difference. What you've gone through is making a difference. But we kind of had where we were going with this, but I truly want to, I want to bring up something quickly, because I don't want to lose this in. You have a show which really brings this about, and that is a show on Friday nights. I saw it the other night. It's called Real Men, Real Talk, Raw. It's on Friday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, and through Spirituality Gone Wild. And I really, I'd like you to talk about it for a minute, because what you just did, is what you're doing on your show. And oh my gosh, I'm just, I'm blown away. I'm inspired, in awe, and blown away by you. Would you talk about your show just a little bit?
Absolutely, sure. My show, the idea came to me over a year ago. It came to me from within, and I put it out there in the universe that I had this idea that I wanted to do a show where a couple of men are live, and we are sharing a part of our story that we either went through or going through, or that we have healed from. And it could be a story about emotional, mental, physical, spiritual, career, relationships, death, medical diagnoses. It's whatever the individual is going through that has the courage and the willingness to come on and share their truth, share their fears, share their successes, share their triumphs, share their humility, tear down the walls of ego and pride, and be able to have a platform where other men can hear what they need to hear to either be willing to just consider maybe making a change in their life that may save their life or improve their life or give them back their life. And also for women to listen in. It's interesting because I've seen some women ask, can we watch the show? And it's like, there's no lockdown. It's on Facebook Live, and then I push it out through my YouTube channel as well. And I love it because for me, what it gives women and men is when I get a guest that's willing to come on and truly be their authentic self, like Scott Thomas was on Friday evening, or like Simon was the prior week, or like Matthew was. It just gives people hope that we can change, we can get better, we can come out of the darkness of the soul, we can improve our relationships, we can not just live in survival anymore, but we could have a life that brings us all of the gifts and blessings that we dreamed of, but we're not able to have. And so that's the platform, that's the premise of the show. I am so excited, and I am so I have such gratitude that it's been coming together. The beginning was really hard for me because I'm not a show guy. I've never really interviewed people. My life was based around a career of selling product, listening to people, knowing the right questions to ask to close the sale. And I guess today it's applying those same basic rules, which is being an active listener and hearing some things that maybe the guest didn't even realize by putting it out there, that I'm going to hone in on that and then go deep with them in that comment that just got kind of slid by, that they may think slid by. But my hope is that I capture some of those just minor slide by statements that are very, very important to really dive into. And that's what I love, is when we're able to be authentic and real and give, it's like, I grew up in the era of Barbara Walters, and I know one of her main keys was to be able to get her guests to get emotionally charged in the moment, in the flow, to where they shed some tears. And, for me today, you have witnessed seeing me get emotional on this show. Right. And if I tell you that I was one of these men that didn't do that, I didn't know what I felt most of the time other than frustration and anger in my life. And resentments eventually. But I didn't know how to express my feelings, especially any feelings of joy and gratitude. And when I got into my own healing recovery, which is really what I would like to have the focus be right now, is as I started to show up in my own 12-step program, I exited out of a program called SAA because I knew then that the program for me was not working. The program for me was basically white knuckling it. It's all I was doing. I wasn't necessarily acting out as a sex addict, which was just one of a plethora of addictions that I had, but it was the one that was profoundly most impacting my family. But I was just white knuckling it. I wasn't healing. The program for me didn't work because it wasn't getting to the root. The root problem wasn't my sex addiction. The root problem wasn't my food addiction. The root problem wasn't my working crazy hours. The root problem wasn't my cigarette smoking. The root problem was mostly codependency. But behind the codependency, that wasn't the root problem either. The root problem was that I had a soul that was damaged, that was wounded, that was traumatized from many different events over my lifetime, but started in my early childhood. And until I was willing to hit my rock bottom, which for me meant near death, I knew that if I didn't change everything in my life, that I was not going to make it. I knew that this is the second chance, the second experience of facing mortality. And I knew that I was at death was knocking at my door. My next stop was death. I couldn't figure out how to get out of pain. I couldn't figure out how to heal, how to help myself. But I knew that I was close to dying. And so I surrendered. The day after I got out of the hospital, I put myself in a second 12-step program. Now, I know, of course, the 12-step programs, we're not supposed to market or advertise them because it kind of goes against your traditions. But I'll tell you what, 21 years of therapy, and either I wasn't listening or I didn't have a therapist that told me, you know what, dude, your problem is you. Your problem is not your wife and whatever addiction she has. Your problem is you. You are as sick as your wife and you need help. And I can't help you as much as you want, but where you can get some of those answers is in a 12-step program called Al-Anon. Wow. And I never heard that. Maybe I wasn't listening. But I woke up in Cedar Sinai and I heard it loud and clear that if I went back home, to my home, I was probably going to die. And I walked into Al-Anon and I used that program as a rehab. I went to 2 meetings a day for the first 365 days of that year. And there were days where I needed a 3rd meeting because 2 wasn't enough. Because that's how addicted I was in my codependency. And I used that program to start to raise my hand and share my story, my truth. And it was early on that I started to cry. And I was like, what is going on? Because I hated people that cried. When my mom used to cry, it used to just drive me crazy. It bothered me on every level. And all of a sudden I'm raising my hand and I'm crying. I'm like, what is going on? Like, who is this man? And it hit me one day, because it didn't hit me. The wisdom came from within. At some point, I realized what had happened was my emotions, my soul was so frozen, like a block of ice. I had nothing to give. I was out. I was depleted. My cup was beyond empty. But what happened was when I raised my hand and I started sharing my story, my truth, as painful as it was, the tears were my soul beginning the thawing out process. And once I realized that, I was like, wow, I'm okay with this crying situation, because it means that if my soul is defrosting and thawing out and the tears are just my soul beginning to heal and feel, I don't ever want to stop crying. I don't ever want to stop feeling. And eventually, my tears were no longer tears of pain, but the majority of them became tears of gratitude and humility for the growth that I encountered, because I just surrendered. And through that surrender, I was willing to consider that perhaps there was a power greater than myself that could help navigate me through this healing process, so that I could not just stay alive and survive, but learn how to live my life, learn how to live, learn how to love, learn how to laugh, and learn how to learn. And God all of a sudden started showing up. All I had to do was be willing. All I had to do was just surrender that idea. And miracles, incredible miracles happened along the way. Early on in my recovery. I mean, like out of the gate. These are stories that if you had scripted them in Hollywood, it would be almost like unbelievable. But these things happened, and I had an awareness as they started to happen. And I continued along my path of recovery because I was so done, and I was willing to do radical things opened my mind to different ideas, different thoughts, different ways of living. I was willing to even embrace the idea that perhaps Western medicine, although it has its place for what I'd say acute care, is good for stitches, is good for immediate needs, but for chronic care, it had fallen short for me, and I no longer had faith that Western medicine was the only solution for me. And people were put in my life, people were entered into my life that educated me that there are alternatives. And we don't have to just go see a regular doctor. We don't have to rely on pharmaceuticals to heal our minds, our bodies, and our souls. And so early on in my recovery, the question was asked, do you think it's possible that generalized anxiety disorder that you've been on pharmaceuticals for 21 years, you may not even need? Is it possible to consider that? And I was like, wow, what a profound question that is. Fast forward, I went and saw my psychiatrist, and a month later, I was off all my psych meds, and I've had maybe 5 or 6 days in the last 33 months where I have awareness that I've got some anxiety, but I've learned some tools. I've got tools today, healthy self-soothing tools, not the cigarettes, not the sex, not the food, not the work, to navigate me to come through those emotional feelings of anxiety. And you know what? I'm drug-free today. I'm not on those psych meds. I'm not on Xanax for breakthrough because those psych meds weren't enough. I needed more. I got off of the statins for cholesterol. When I had my work done, I was at 400 on my overall cholesterol. And then they put me back on the statins, and they still couldn't get my numbers where I wanted them to be, where they wanted them to be. I was still out of normal range. And I started seeing a homeopathic doctor who actually had studied under my cardiologist at a Cedars-Sinai, Dr. P.K. Shaw. When I saw him, he goes, "You're not going to believe this. I studied under yours." I'm like going to myself, oh, I don't know if that's a good thing because I went off of all my meds. My goal is for you to get me off my meds. So if you're not on the same plan as I am, then I'm probably not the right patient for you. And so, make a long story short, eventually I had the courage, with his assistance, to come off of my statins for my cholesterol level. And this is my truth. I got off my statins.
Wow.
And I have been off of them a year and a half. My triglycerides, June 28th, when I went for my last blood work, was at 94. 94 is a hell of a number for triglycerides. It's in a solid, normal, healthy range. I hadn't been in that range probably since before probably my 30s. My overall cholesterol is in the 150s, 160 range without drugs. And I've lost 58 pounds in the last 33 months. And so my story of healing is this. It's not about just the physical part. I had to heal my wounds and traumas from my entire life. And they weren't just from the stuff in my childhood. And that's a whole nother topic to talk about, but we're not going to go there today. Other than to say that I was profoundly affected by people, places, and things in my home, outside of my home, that just affected me. Like we all have traumas. We all have some bigger, some little, but we all come out into adulthood somewhat affected. And I didn't know how badly I was. And so I didn't know what I didn't know until I knew it. And so my story is a story about not living in pain, but it's a story about healing. And, my physical part, I've reversed the majority of my medical diagnoses. Of course, I was diabetic, and I'm no longer diabetic. I no longer have high cholesterol. I believe that my physical well-being is totally healed. Now, I've had some recent tests, and it still shows that one of the diagnoses is still present in my body. It was a blood disorder that they believe is what caused the heart attack and what was behind my body shutting down 33 months ago. But that's also my goal, is to reverse that. It's an autoimmune disorder called APS, and it's called antiphospholipid syndrome. And ultimately, that's my goal, is to have that one reversed. And so God and I have a very long conversation every morning as part of my spiritual rituals and practice. And part of it is talking about, my physical well-being. We have a nice long conversation, and we have some agreements that we both are working towards together. And I say that, in somewhat of a humorous way, but that's my truth. Today, my healing is that my healing is about. I remember when I went to one of my first doctors after surgeries, and I was worried to go in there because I decided this time I wasn't going to go back to the gym. I made the conscious decision that I was going to just start walking at the beach. And then I had to go see my doctor, and I knew the question was going to come, what kind of exercise are you doing? So I went in there with fear. And I ended up speaking, of course, the truth this time. And they were like, that's perfect. I'm going, what do you mean that's perfect? I go, but I'm not breaking out into a sweat. I'm not getting my heart rate up. I'm just walking. And she said to me, that's perfect. Don't stop. And I go, well, I could get to the gym a couple times a week if you really need me. I'm like trying to give myself an out. It's like, no, don't do that. Just keep walking. How often are you walking? I'm like, I'm going like 7 days a week. I'm going every day. And she said, okay, well, don't stop. And matter of fact, keep your shoes off, because make sure you're grounding, because you're getting the negative ions from the ocean, but you're also grounding your feet to the earth, they both have so many medical benefits. And so I did that for a year. And then through that process, through the walking, is where I found that I was able to have my conscious contact, my spiritual connection with God. And that's where I started to embrace doing prayer and meditation. I didn't know how to pray. I had to ask a friend, how do you pray? I had never been taught how to pray in my life. I didn't know how. And so she taught me how to pray. And for me personally, I'm not a religious person, and I wasn't interested to do the ritualistic way of praying. For me, prayer takes place in an outdoor space where I'm on my bicycle today. I ride. I have a specific type of music on that reaches my soul connection to the music, through the music, while I'm listening to this music on my mini Bose speaker, which is just so powerful. I'm in prayer. And in between prayer, I greet people. I meet people this is a bike path. I must run into a couple hundred people every morning. Today, what I learned is, through part of my healing process, is connecting, how important people are in my life. And so sometimes I do a peace sign. Sometimes I do one of these. I wave. I say good morning. I say have a beautiful day. I connect with people, and they respond back to me. And part of my healing is the soul-to-soul connection that takes place. And I've made a number of friends that, I call them the warriors. They come out, and I see them, and we stop and we have a conversation. So all this is unfolding as I'm going through part of my spiritual practices, but that's part of it.
Right.
And then what happened one day while I was on a bike ride, it had been suggested to me early on in my recovery program that I needed to start to journal. And I was like, I don't know how to ride. I can't do it. I just can't put it out there. And one day I'm on my bike ride, and I got inspired to write. And I pulled over to the side, and I started to write on my phone. And I wrote what I was feeling in the moment. And it wasn't no more than 2 days later, the same thing happened. And I pulled over to the side and right shoreline, and I just started writing a second time. And then wisdom came from within, and I realized that what was happening was I started to write. I was writing blog. I was writing my true story that I needed to share in the most public forum way, because what I didn't know Well, what I realized was that my whole life was, unfortunately, I was a very guarded individual. I had a lot of secrets. I had a lot of lies. And I was a liar. I was not honest. I lacked integrity. I had no empathy and I had no compassion for anyone else. I was labeled by my wife a narcissist, amongst other labels. Some of them I won't repeat because let's just say that it's profanity laced, and there's no room for that in my life today. But I can tell you this is that I am not a narcissist. I can tell you I am not a sex addict. I can tell you that I am not codependent. Those were all behaviors. Those were all addictions that I had because I didn't know any other way to make myself feel better. I was just a man in pain. And through this healing process, through this committed 33-month journey that has not taken a day off, I am a healed man. I no longer am a sex addict. I no longer am codependent. I no longer have a food addiction. I no longer am a workaholic. Who I am today and who I work to be every day is a man that just lives in humility, that just speaks his truth, regardless if you see it that way or not. It doesn't matter what you think of me, and it doesn't matter what other people, who they want me to be or who they think how I should behave. The only thing that matters is that through this process of self-care, and my self-care all unfolds on that beach in the morning, as I described it, brought me to a place I never thought I'd be, which was through self-care. That was the gateway for me to learn first how to like myself. And then I fell in love with myself. And today I love myself. And it doesn't mean that my life is perfect. I still have challenges like everybody else, but I know where to go. I know what to reach for. I know how to take care of myself. I don't look for other people to bring me happiness today. I don't look for other people to fill me up because that's how I live my life. I always wanted my wife to know what my needs were and to take care of me. And she was not capable of ever meeting my expectations. And here's a little secret, people. There is no one that can take care of my needs. There is no person that's going to ever bring me happiness. There is no person that's going to fix my problems. It begins and ends with me. So, for example, by the time I get back from my spiritual rituals in the morning of self-care and self-love, I am filled up. I am now ready to start my day. However it's going to unfold with people, places, and things, I have what I'll call self-balance so that I have more to give to others. And I'm not relying on others to make me happy or to give me contentment. I know where to find it. It's already within me. I just got to go reach in deep on a daily basis because it's not like a bank account where I could just keep filling it up and like I could let a week go, I could go a month, I could go 2 months and just watch it slowly depleting. All I get is a daily reprieve. I get one day. And that day is just today. If God gives me the grace and the blessing to wake up today, the first thing I do is drink my 20 ounces of water, and then I grab my coffee, and then I get on my bike, I get to the beach, and I start my spiritual practice. That's how I start every morning. And then the rest of the day is nothing more than a gift and blessing. And even when I have to walk through some very painful opportunities with people, places, and things because they present themselves with strangers and with people I know and people I care about, as long as I've taken care of myself and I have that balance, I'm better prepared to not react, but just be. Just be present and make behavioral decisions for myself that are not hurtful to others, but most importantly, that are not going to hurt me.
Right.
And it's just a whole new way to live. And it's a life filled with very, very, very little expectations of others. I was listening to oh God, there's so much. I know we're running,
I know
and we
we're
didn't even
really
cover where we wanted to
close.
go.
You know, we've got at least a couple more shows, you and I, to do. And will you please quickly tell them about the book that you're writing? Because we've only got a couple minutes left, and also how to get a hold of you. Because Jay, you've taken your life story, and I'm just so inspired myself. I'm a recovering addict, and I'm so inspired by what you've been through and your authenticity about all of it. And but you're working with others to help them. You've taken what has happened to you and you're paying it forward, if you will. You know, you're not some guy who got his PhD or his doctoral degree or whatever. And I'm not putting them down, don't get me wrong. But you're a guy who actually has lived it. You died, you came back, you beat the odds. You overcame your addictions, you've healed. You're now, I hope you don't mind me saying, in a beautiful relationship. You introduced me to Mary earlier, and you two together just absolutely blow me away. That inspires me, your relationship that you guys have. And you've done so much. You've taken this place and you healed, you kind of regressed, you healed again, and you've reinvented yourself, you've reinvented your life, you've healed, and you're using that to help others. So please just quickly tell us about your book that's going to be coming out eventually, and also about how people can get in touch with you and help. And we'll have to come back another time because I have pages of questions yet to ask you, Jay.
Well, okay. Well, I'd be honored to come back. I thank you for that invite. You know, the writing that I started to do as I would get inspired along the bike path led me to realizing that, in fact, it was something that I needed to push out. I no longer want to live a life of deceit and deceptions and lies and covert and overt. So I decided that by sharing my journey, my healing journey, as it unfolds along my spiritual practice and rituals, I would push it out. And just prior to that, it had been suggested to me by a number of people that my story needs to be told, and I need to write a book to share my story of the life I lived and where I am today. And it wasn't about 4 months into blogging that one day while I was on my ride, again, it bubbled up from within. It didn't come from up here, because again, my best thinking up here is what got me in a lot of trouble. But it came from within. Wisdom came from within and said, you don't need to struggle about writing a book. You already are. Your book is being written. Your book is just your short stories, your blogs. And so I am working on putting a book together. The name of my book may be settled, it may not. Right now, it's based on what you had posted as the invite to the show, Dying to Live, a man's journey of healing his mind, body, and soul. But the book name may just be Dying to Live. And, you know, you may or may not understand what that title means, but I tell you, what it means to me is exactly what it says, which is before I hit my rock bottom, I didn't have the courage to commit suicide, but I certainly had it figured out. I had it all figured out. And the way I was going to die when I just couldn't take it anymore was I was going to go to the gym, and I was going to be on that elliptical cross trainer, and I was going to push my heart rate so damn high that I was going to just put myself in a coronary arrest and take myself out. At least doing what I love to do, which was, exercise, and I'd be commended for that. He died doing what he loved to do, which was trying to stay well, right? So there is a coward's way of taking himself out. I had it all planned. And the funny thing is that one day, this is before I really got into recovery, I was talking to a very dear friend of mine, and I shared that truth with him, and I'd never told it to anybody else. I don't think I even shared that with my wife. But I told him that story, and he said to me, truth. I had the same out. So therein lies my book, because so many people are in pain, and so many people don't know that there is a way out. And it doesn't have to be suicide. It doesn't have to be assisted suicide at the gym. It doesn't have to be suicide the traditional ways we all read about and hear about on the news. But that's another thing. I checked out of the news. I unplugged 33 months ago. I don't have TV in my home. I do not watch TV. It doesn't serve me anymore.
Right.
At all. I don't need to be entertained. I want to be living my life, not be numbed out in front of a TV screen with housewives of New Jersey or LA or Lifetime channels or any of the other shows that don't bring me any serenity and don't bring me inner peace or joy or bliss or wisdom. They just bring justification of pain. It didn't work for me anymore. None of it worked. And so the name of my book is Dying to Live, because today I was dying, but today I was living to die. That was my life. Unfortunately, it had reached that pinnacle point. I was living to die.
Right.
And today I am dying to live, because dying in a positive sense is like, I love how I feel on most days, even when there is pain and even when there is grieving. And I've had to go through the loss. I exited out of my marriage. I chose to exit out very early on. When I exited out of Cedar Sinai, I knew if I went home, I was going to die. And so I separated from my wife, and that was a two-year, I'd say journey. And then my dad passed away 3 months after I got released from the hospital. And I had to go through the grieving process of that. And thankfully, I was able to see him right before he passed and make amends, because I had detached 4 years earlier due to my own anger and resentments towards my family, my family of origin. And so I was able to make peace with my dad, do the best I could to make my amends to him. And I believe he heard me, because he acknowledged it through the only way he could at the time. And it's just how people can get a hold of me is through Facebook, through Agape Mind, Body, Soul coaching page, or through Real Men, Real Talk, Raw. My phone number is posted. I have it out. It's public. It's 562-505-4670. It's on my personal page. I was suggested that I needed to help other people. And I was like, ooh, that feels really icky. Like, I spent a whole lifetime trying to help people, and it didn't work so well. And at some point, I realized that what they were suggesting was not to help people through unhealthy behavior on my part, but just by sharing what has worked for me in my own healing process, what has worked for me in my own recovery of my mind, my body, and my soul. And so I did go to school. I went back to school and I got certified to become a coach. And so I help people that want help.
Right.
And not everybody that shows up at my doorstep is really ready. And they typically, those that are not ready, they run pretty quick. They run away because they just need to get sicker. They're not in enough pain, you know. And I know we just got to wrap up here, but I'm gonna share something. I was in reflection, and well, I tend to be in reflection a lot of the time, not in a negative way, but in a positive way, because I want to continue to learn and grow. But I said, you know, the only difference between me and a lot of people that just struggle to put themselves in a, let's say, an emotional space of discipline to do spiritual practices, which for me includes the physical part of the exercise and the emotional and the mental and the whole balancing that I do through my practice. The only difference is that I had to hit my rock bottom. I had to nearly die. I had to have a medical diagnosis, not just one, not just two, but I think I had 8 or 9. I had to come that close to be willing to get help, to help myself. If I hadn't hit my bottom, I don't know that I'd be where I am today, because that's part of my story. That's part of who I am. This is me. And so I have to work really hard at not sitting in judgment of others, but just accepting that we are all right where we're at in our journey.
Yes.
It's not my business, it's yours. If you want help and you truly are ready to surrender your old thoughts, your old belief systems, because you realize that you're out of answers and it's no longer serving you and it's no longer serving people you care about, then just maybe you may be able to get some relief. And I'm talking about permanent, internal, healing soul relief, not relief that pharmaceuticals give you, because they're temporary. They don't heal us. They're just a Band-Aid. They actually cause way more damage to us because of the side effects. And I got hammered by those side effects, and I had no idea how much they had impacted my health until I got off of them. And so that's where I'm at. I am thrilled to, I didn't know where I truly was going to go today. I know you had shared some questions for me. And, you know, sometimes I don't do this that often where I tell my whole story, especially as a host of my show these days. I'm more interested to hear other people share what's going on with them, other men. And so this is a very rare opportunity, and I probably, well, it unfolded just as it needed to.
Well,
and maybe somebody heard something, a truth that may help them have the courage to finally speak their truth, if nothing else for themselves. Because as long as I continue to live the life that I was living, I was never going to come home. And I'm not talking about coming home to my 4 walls, my physical home. I'm talking about coming home to my soul, coming home to me. And there is not a more beautiful gift that I have been given than to come home. And I am a blessed man today. I have some amazing people in my life, and there are people in my life that I haven't even met yet that are just gifts, and it just happens. And some of them are short seasons and some of them are long, but every person, every experience that touches my life today is a blessing and a gift, because through even some of the painful ones is how I grow. And I don't ever want to stop growing, because it just brings me that much closer to what is referred to as enlightenment. And if you say to me, your last question to me could be, what is your why? what is your why today? And my why is, I think you have conveyed it on this show as I have. One is, if I could help one other person change the trajectory of their life by my inspirational story, then I have made my living amends to others. It's my way of paying back. And the second why in my life, if I may, is because the 2 times that I was laying in that hospital bed, and I knew that I may not make it and I'm in trouble, I asked myself this question, and it's the only time I asked this question of myself, and I hated the answer. If today is the last day of my life, 2 things. One is, what is the legacy that I leave behind? And the second one is, what will my eulogy sound like? And I hated the answer. Both of those questions, I knew the answer was really bad because I knew the truth. I knew who I had become. I knew the man that I was, and I knew the man that I wasn't. And I didn't know how I was going to get here. But I knew that my work wasn't done on me because I need to change my legacy and my eulogy because I don't want to leave this earth being the man that I was, because I was not a kind, loving man. And that's what I get to do today, is I get to work on changing myself, changing me so that just maybe, my family will see me through a different set of lenses someday. My children and my ex-wife. But I have no control over what they think or how they perceive me. I only have control over my own behavior and how I live my life today. And I'm at peace with who I am today. And I continue to work really hard just to be the best version of myself and to continue to heal. And hopefully through my healing, my relationships can also heal with my own children and my ex-wife.
I pray for you. I do. Jay, thank you so much. You have been an inspiration to me, and I know to everyone who's been watching. I've been watching the comments, and you touch lives. Your story makes a difference. You make a difference. And I am truly grateful to you for what you've brought to us today. And I do intend on having you come back because we have lots more to talk about, my friend. We really do. You have so much more inside of you to give. And this was just the tip of the iceberg. So I thank you. I honor you. And I certainly respect you more than just about anyone I think I've ever met on this planet right now. So I am so grateful. Thank you for sharing your time with us, sharing your story with us, and sharing your heart and your soul with us, which is so beautiful.
Thank you. I will be back. We got to talk about hope.
Yes.
We got to talk about the 5 nuggets. I've got 5 tools. I blogged about them. But we're going to talk about them. We got to go deep into that because there's so many free things that I'm willing to give away.
Awesome.
And, so whenever you say you give me the date, I'm willing to come back. And
we will definitely. Yes.
And we'll keep the focus on strictly moving forward because I spent a lot of time in the past. But to be present, I needed to go back there so that your audience understood where I came from
Yes.
and where I'm at.
Absolutely.
And now moving forward, when we get together, we can stay focused 100% on the present, not on the future,
I love
because
it.
we
Yep.
don't know what the
No
future holds.
future.
That's a trip.
Only now. Only,
Exactly.
only now. I thank you. I thank all of our viewers for joining us today. I know you enjoyed this as much as I did, and I've heard the story, but it was, wow. I gleaned so much more even today. So I thank you all. Please come back and see me next Sunday again. And it's take your love, take your light out and spread it to everyone you see. Be kind to yourself. Self-love, self-care is the most important thing you can do for yourself. And be kind to everyone that you come in contact with. You know, let's all go out there and be light workers and just burst it out towards everyone. So thank you again, Jay. And I will see you all next week. And Jay will be back, I guarantee you, very soon. We're going to get our calendars together and make this happen. Bye-bye, everybody. Have a blessed and beautiful week, everyone. Namaste.